This is the voice of Bold Business Radio, and I am your host, Jessica Dewell of Red Direction. You are listening to Personalized Learning. And there are two pieces of the title that are really deep opportunities to explore. One is personalized. What does that mean? How does that work? What does it look like? How is it actionable? And the other part is to learn. What is learning? Do we only do it in school? How does it appear in our adult lives outside of our formal education? And what are all the ways that we can learn? Those are just some of the areas we touched on. I really think that we could have gone into and touched on so much more. And in fact, we probably will. In just a few minutes, you will hear Joey and Tom talk to me about what makes personalized learning a necessity for business today. Before we get there, I want to take a minute and I would like to introduce both Joey and Tom. Joey Giangola is a third-generation insurance broker for his family agency, Giangola Insurance. There, he serves as the director of marketing as well as the head of individual health insurance sales. He also is a managing partner for the GROW, G-R-O-W program, where he helps rebuild insurance agencies to make them relevant to the modern insurance consumer. He is also the host of Insurance in Your Words, a podcast from agents living and breathing insurance every day and struggling to figure out what they can do to stay ahead. When Joey isn't talking about insurance on the internet or helping his clients, he's probably spending time with his family. Tom Rhodes spent more than 40 years in sales and retail management. He started in a sales role with a textile converting company selling to the athletic apparel industry. Then he spent more than 30 years in retail store and multi-unit leadership. He is very involved in social media and the role it plays in building relationships and businesses today. We'll be right back.
Welcome to the Voice of Bold Business, the show that provides everything smart leaders need to evaluate situations, build relationships, and create solutions. Jessica Dewell candidly talks about the skills necessary to build tenacity and do more with less. And now, here's Jessica.
I'm going to start the conversation today with Joey and Tom, specifically with a quote, and a quote of somebody who I love and admire on many different levels. In fact, I grew up with this guy, and it says, it's a button. I found it at a store, so I pin it to my backpack. And it says, "You're only given one little spark of madness. You mustn't lose it."
That's a great quote, though.
Isn't that a good quote? Yeah, that would be Robbin Williams said that.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So I thought that
totally makes sense.
And I thought it was perfect that I was walking around this morning and I happened to notice this because we are talking about personalized learning. And in this program, we're doing two things. We're describing and defining what does personalized mean, as well as what learning means now that we all graduated from college just a couple years ago. So we're going to get started, and I would like to know what makes personalized learning a necessity for business today.
Our role is to help either ourselves or other individuals find whatever their greatness is, okay? And to do that, we have to find their passion. We can sit and train them all we want, but if they're not interested, then we get the results that you talked about earlier. They retain 10%. People learn in basically three different ways. They listen to it, they see it, or they touch it, which I would consider actionable. They take some sort of action. And in most cases, there's part of one of those or two of those things together that actually help you. So I'll give you an example. When I was younger, I was an athlete. I played every sport. I didn't learn by taking lessons from a coach or anything. I learned by going and watching the professionals and then trying to emulate what they did when I went to my personal training, my practice, or whatever the case may be. My thing was visualizing what was happening and trying to make it actionable by my doing it. And so, and other people, they can just listen to somebody tell them, like a coach, and then they try and make it actionable. But one of the most important things, personalized learning, if you were giving it or trying to help someone with it, is to first to understand how that person learns, that individual person learns. You mentioned earlier, companies bring trainers in, or they have computer-based learning courses or whatever. If the person isn't interested in that type of learning, then they're not going to learn. My theory is that training is not learning, it's only an opportunity to learn. Yes, training gives somebody an opportunity. If we don't find their passion and there is no interest, or we don't find the right vehicle for them to learn, then they're not going to. So you have to make it personalized in the sense that you have to be able to find out what interests them, what's their passion, what's going to make them come to work, or what's going to make them pick up a book. They can enjoy it so they learn it. Because if you don't enjoy it, you're probably not learning it. I mean, just a fact. So for me, that's the big thing. How do we find greatness in the individual or ourselves? How do we find greatness within ourselves, find our passion, and move from the concept of training to the concept of actually learning and being able to do it?
Thank you. All right, Joey.
Tom, I think we're going to get along just fine. I like to say emulate before you originate, right? And you said emulation is how you learned how to learn to do what you did on the athletic fields of your choice. And I think so many people try to make it more difficult than it needs to be at first. They try to, like you said, learn in different ways that aren't maybe conducive to what is natural to them. Somebody did something first for a reason. Like those guys that you were already watching, they were there. They got there by doing it a certain way. And you learning that and then applying that 1 or 2% of your own idea to it is what's going to make it different. And people don't want to do that a lot of the times. I'm always shocked by that. And a lot of what you said of figuring out a way to make it personal to that person, because they're not going to learn if they're not interested. I think it's pre-programmed for people to say that they want more information or they've got all the information they need. There's studies, like I'm not smart enough to remember who did these studies or what they were, but you either have that, I've got all the information I need brain, or you are I'm continually just eating more stuff up. The one trick that I've always kind of done, I don't know if this is just an excuse for being lazy or doing things that I like, but I just kind of constantly keep my brain in a mode of, how do I apply this? How do I make this useful? How do I make this relevant? And that could be as simple as driving down the street, just looking at stoplight changing. That's a very random answer. Or it could be watching a TV show, thinking, how does this apply to my business? And what lessons am I learning here? So, I mean, it's just, I don't think we're looking for enough opportunities to learn. We just want to kind of tune out, and that we kind of define these boundaries of when we can learn and when we can't learn. The best day of my life was when I stopped going to school and then I could learn whatever I wanted. Nobody ever told me that what I was doing on my own was learning. They kind of put these rigid guidelines to it. Was not letting me understand exactly what or why or how, and helping people understand that of it's okay to learn the way that you end up absorbing information the best. And it's just creating that realization in the first place is something that I don't think we focus on enough. And I think what you were kind of getting to of helping people identify that to be their greatest self, figuring out for other people, is tricky because a lot of people don't want to learn, and how do you make them do something they don't want to already do? And so do you just focus on the people that are interested, or do you try to figure out a way to coax the people that aren't necessarily naturally drawn to continuing to improve themselves over time?
Honestly, sometimes part of that learning curve is learning that you're not in the right place. I'll give you a great example for your business. Okay, my dad was in the same business as you. I tried it. I didn't like it. It wasn't for me. So guess what? I learned that wasn't the direction I needed to be in. I need to be in something I was more comfortable with or more passionate about or felt I could be more successful about. So sometimes you just learn by trying things and they just don't work out. It's still a learning process.
Something that was said, Joey, that you said, and I'm going to summarize. We don't have to have structure to learn. And I'm wondering about that structure. People really like school or they really don't like school. How could we frame it differently so that learning is not associated with our experiences at school?
School is very structured. The problem with being very structured is that you don't have the freedom to learn. You're giving certain things. Yeah, you're giving basic math, basic English, basic foreign language, your core courses. Somewhere in there, you have to have the ability to learn about life, because you're right. If you just go through that and you go through the structure of school and everything is kind of black and white within each subject and you walk out of your college, have you actually learned anything about now, how do I really live my life? How do I pay my bills? How do I manage my time? How do I do any of these things that make life real? School life is not real, if you really think about it. School life is very structured. Even in college, when you kind of start letting loose a little bit, it's still not real. Because you still have a structure. You're not on your own. You don't have your own apartment or your own house or your own family. So all those things kind of come after schooling. So the question is really, how do we get some of that into a person's life on a day-to-day basis? And I think that's where we come in as parents. Our job really is to teach our children or who people you're working with, whatever, real life. This is how it really works, folks.
The action and the outcome, the action and the outcome.
Everything you do is you to make your own choices, as we talked about a couple of weeks ago, but there's consequences of those choices. You can't just choose to decide to quit your job today because guess what? Now you can't pay your bills. That's the consequence. Choices and consequences pieces of education you don't really get in elementary school, middle school, high school. You get because it's too structured. So I think it's important in my mind that we understand that around every corner there's a door. And there's lots of doors. We should try to open as many of those doors as possible at some point in time in our lives in order to find the right one for us.
So I'm going to repeat what you said in a different way to make sure I understood. Okay. We have this concept of learning because we did it from the time we were 5 to 18 for sure. And some of us up until we were in our 20s somewhere as potential secondary education. And so we have this concept of you go to school to learn, and facts and figures and information like that is only half of the picture. The other half of the picture is, how do I show up in life? What is the type of person I am? Do I understand the outcomes of the actions that I take? And am I going to own the outcomes of the actions I take? What would you add to that, Joey?
I mean, I think it goes back to the different triggers, right? So when you sit in that desk at school, you're priming yourself to think, all right, I guess I'm going to learn something now. And it's probably going to be something that I don't have much of a choice in. And we have like you said, 18 years that we associate with, you don't have a choice of what you're learning. They're telling us what we need to learn. And we're doing it in a way that in most cases is pretty boring for people involved, unless you have a really good teacher, which my wife's a teacher, they're hard to come by, right? So to teach each kid individually is just not possible. Well, I mean, it is possible today. We're just not necessarily maybe as interested as we need to be in it. That I think is the ultimate challenge, is not saying like, oh, I'm sitting at this desk, so now it's time to learn. It's the more active and passive learning, right? We passively learn stuff all the time, but we're not aware that we're actively learning it. Like you said, the life skills, but we don't pick them up and nobody focuses on them, and they try to, if anything, hide them from us as long as they can for whatever reason. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But I have 3 little kids, and I'm terrified of when my son's going to start kindergarten next year. I'm terrified of the garbage that I'm going to have to hear him bring home of just like what they're going to be learning and the time that they're going to be wasting. I'm literally scared of the next 18 years of how I don't really have great schooling options for him to learn in a way that I think is going to be best serving him for the next 20, 30, 40, whatever it is. But it's figuring out all of that stuff of saying it doesn't have to be this way. It can be whatever way you want. And I'm not sure if I heard it here, but there's a charity, they call it a for-purpose company, Pencils of Promise. I'm sure some of you have probably heard of it. Research on how kids learn best. And they said they actually learn best. And like what you said, Tom, when they take an action, they touch it, they learn the best when they actually teach it, right? So first graders teach the kindergartners, the second graders teach the first graders and all that good stuff. It's all this kind of stuff that we aren't exploring and letting our kids do. And I don't know, this could be way wrong. I just could have been a guy that's reading this in a book somewhere, heard this on a podcast and repeating it to you people. But I'm saying like, it sounds very logical. We're not exploring different opportunities that are easily available to us.
There's this concept of this logical brain and this feeling brain, or our heart and our mind. And sometimes they get in conflict. One of the things that I wrote down as both of you guys were talking was, where do we get our information? Because sometimes we hear information and we believe it because we decided the source was credible. And sometimes we read the information, like what you were just sharing, Joey, about the promise of a pencil. You just know in your heart there's a truth there.
To me, learning includes listening to, for a better term, the other side. Okay, the other side of the story. We don't know the whole story. Unless we're in that person's shoes, we don't necessarily know the whole story of anything. Unless you're in that person's shoes and you keep changing which person you're with, this person, this one, then you're still learning all the time, because you're never going to know everything of anybody. We form an opinion and then we decide what we're going to watch so it agrees with us because it makes us feel better, or what we're going to read because it makes us feel better. To me, that's backwards, because I'm not really learning anything. I'm just patting myself on the back. If you have a certain stance on, I don't care whether it is how we handle money or politics or whatever the case may be, I would urge you to go out and read everything you can about the other side. You're going to find somewhere in between those two things the truth. You're going to find the reality, and you're going to find a better feeling about yourself, because you're going to be a little bit more open-minded about what you understand. And when you have a conversation, you can say, yeah, I read that by this person, and I read that by this person. I've kind of come to this, even though they're both totally on different sides. You educate yourself much more if you can keep more doors open, and if you only look in one path all the time.
I don't know if we mentioned this, but you said, Tom, I was in the same business as your father and I sell health insurance, and there isn't a more decisive issue in the right and the left of the country right now than health insurance. I think the Democrats, you think one way, you're Republican, you think another way. And that's a perfect issue. I've talked to people from both sides. I've been yelled at people from both sides every day of how it sucks and they don't like it. They're both 80% wrong about what actually needs to get done, and they don't look at down the middle. But I think, Jessica, to go back to the question that I think I remember you asking, I learn a lot of stuff on YouTube. I'm a visual learner, so if I watch people do it, I'm constantly I'll go video to video. And I don't know how it's going to relate to what I'm doing at the time, but maybe 6 months from now, I'm actually going to recall it. But just allowing those times of curiosity, because we kind of, again, quell them. It's like, oh, I should be doing this now, as opposed to saying, well, I'm going to learn about this because it's all of a sudden I've got this spark for it. And maybe that's where that quote started, but it's just allowing yourself that freedom. Now we could say if we were really, truly in control of everything, maybe we could get to the point where we could control those urges as well and learn maybe in a more efficient way, back to Tom's point of time management. So having enough awareness to know what we're learning, when we're learning, and why we're learning it probably can go a long way.
My learning right now is, how can I pass things on to my children and their children to help them be better as they grow up? Maybe not make the mistakes that I made or the choices that I made that can help them be better. So where you are kind of in your life lots of times will also kind of push you or have you lean towards a certain type of learning of what you're using it for. For me, it's not about necessarily going to work every day and worrying about how I'm working with 100 associates in a store. It's about, what's my legacy, I guess, and how do I pass this on to my kids and their kids and so on and so forth. So
I want to talk a little bit about mindset, shift into mindset, because we've got this concept of we're not really observant when it comes to other people. We know what we are, we know what we face, we know the things we have, we've got our own challenges, we only have so much time in a day, and the list goes on. Yet something that Joey said at the beginning was, I have all the info I need, brain, or I want to eat up all the information I can get, brain. There's this concept, this mindset. Is our brain closed? Or is our brain open? How we go about the world, the way we receive information, whether we seek out information, how we react to what comes at us, all of that has been studied by, or concepts or thoughts about how people could start opening their brain a little to get more information, more learning.
Are we going to try and make somebody be something that they are just because we think that that's what they need to be or that's what we are? And again, I mean, if they're set on their thing, then maybe they're just not somebody that you're going to associate with all that often, because it's like, all right, I don't have but 5 things to say to you. How's the weather? Hey, yeah, they plowed the street pretty good this morning. And did you get your newspaper, which doesn't exist anymore, sort of thing? Do we need to associate with everybody? And do we need to have everybody associate with the way how we want to associate? I do think it's a generally good rule of thumb to have people be as educated as possible. And there's probably certain basic fundamentals that we could probably say, like what Tom was mentioning about the different points of view that relate to, how we live our lives socially and culturally. Let's put it this way. How open does their valve need to be? Because ours might be 100%, maybe they're only 10%. What's that threshold that's going to get us to where we all want to go, I guess, would be the question that I would toss out.
If you're kind of comfortable in your life and you're where you want to be, I don't think your mind necessarily has to be much more open than you are. If you're looking at things kind of in your business in particular, you deal with lots of different kinds of people. I would think you have to be very open-minded in order to be able to try to relate to as many different types, economically, physically, everything. You would have to have a more open mind than someone who might just be a stay-at-home person and they're home all the time and they go to Walmart and back, and that's what everything we're talking about is very personalized. Everything is. Our mindsets are very personal. Our how much we want to learn is very very personal. Everything is an individual, and I think that at the beginning I mentioned, how do we help people find their individual greatness in whatever it is they want to be in? Maybe it's, I want to be a housewife for the rest of my life. Help you do that in the best way you can. I want to be a teacher. How do I help you be the best teacher you can be? I want to be, whatever the case is, whatever their interest is, whatever they're happy in, whatever their happy place is, I think, the role is how do we help them do that?
What was the pressure point that required some sort of change, and what learning were you either directed into or sought out?
One of the best roles I had in my career was when I was a district manager for a company, and I had about 13 stores. And we've talked enough and enough where you kind of know that, my big thing is that my people come first. I work with people. They don't work for me. I work with them. All those type of things. And so everything was going fantastic. We had a kind of regime change, and the new person basically came in and told me that he felt I would never be successful because I cared about my people. Well, of course, that's a totally, that concept is foreign to me. So
right, it's against your truth. That is true. Yeah.
So the hard thing, so then you have to make this decision at that point in time. You put your job and your career on the line by sticking with what you believe in and what has been successful for you, whether they think so or not, or do you try to change yourself as a person and become this person, non-caring, whatever? Well, I couldn't make that change, and I didn't want to make that change. Okay, so yes, it ended up in a career change, and that life happens that way. But sometimes you have to make decisions based on what your values are and what your belief systems are. Maybe take you someplace you don't necessarily want to be, but you have to live with yourself the next day. So the learning from that is that you get back up.
If you're learning, and again, back to definitely learning other people, if you're learning, outpaces somebody else, it's always going to create a point of friction, because if you get ahead of somebody and you're trying to tell them that this is where we want to go, and they're not seeing it, or they don't want to see it, or whatever it is, they're going to feel uncomfortable, and they're not going to like it, and they'll probably yell at you once or twice. Luckily enough, I didn't have that experience with the work that I do. And again, like I said, I sell health insurance. And when I came into the business 8 years ago, for me to be successful, I was going to have to use the internet. I was going to have to sell online. Like, I came out of previous experiences creating content in other industries and things like that. And I knew I was going to need to do something that was natural to me. And it took a little bit of time for my old school agency, I'm the youngest guy there, under 50, for them to kind of grasp that what this was. And it took a while. And luckily, they're patient enough with me to let it work. It was, I think this is important. And I think this is the way that we need to acquire new business moving forward. And luckily, I've been right so far, because for the last 4 or 5 years, I've focused heavily on video, and video is obviously still just becoming more and more of a thing. I've got videos on YouTube that people are watching right now that are calling me up wanting to buy health insurance from me. So you got to know when you think you're right, and if it's important enough, and to take that chance, and to, I guess, figure out a way to, like you said, not hit that wall, or hit it as gently as possible, because you're only going to hurt yourself and the person you're running into if you hit it full speed. And if it's important enough, figure a way around it or through it.
If you don't know by now that I love books, well, they're right here. So this is called The Fourth Industrial Revolution by Klaus Schwab. There's a part about the economy, and one of the things it talks about, and specifically related to labor, and labor are the jobs that we do to make money so that we can go spend our money and contribute to society and let this circle continue to go around and round. One of the things they said is that the fourth industrial revolution seems to be creating fewer jobs in new industries than previous revolutions. There's an estimate that only 0.5% of the U.S. workforce is employed in industries that did not exist at the turn of the century. Then it says in the 80s, there was an 8% increase of new jobs in new industries, and in the 90s, 4.5%. So here we are, we have jobs that don't exist anymore, and people are worried about the changing of the times and industries that are at the end of their life cycle. And I think people are forgetting that every time there's an end to something, there's a beginning of something new, and it requires a change, and it requires a change of thought. Yet we forget that all the jobs that are, for whatever reason, changing or going away or being automated, automation is, according to this, automation is our biggest issue in terms of our job loss. What we don't realize is that people are creating their own jobs every day. They're creating companies that do things that have never existed before. We can't even imagine what's coming in the future, and we're worried about what is happening that we can see happening, because it changes our status quo. It challenges our own personal existence. To me, when I think about personalized learning, I think it's incredibly bold. It's bold to continue to learn. It's bold to accept a rabbit hole and go down it. It's bold to make sure you have the time management piece in place to allow learning to occur when and how we learn and want to learn best. And I want to know from you guys, why do you think personalized learning is incredibly bold? What advice and tips would you leave with our listeners?
First of all, I think you can never stop learning. Once you think you know it all, then you should understand that you definitely don't know it all. The first thing is you have to learn. You have to continue to learn, whether it's for yourself or for you to pass it on to other people, or for you to be able to be more of support for somebody, or whatever the case may be. I think for many years, we passed on the entire education system to the school system. That's it. You went to school, you learned this, you learned your ABCs, and then you went off and you worked in a factory, or there aren't any factories to go work into. And what hasn't necessarily trickled down is the concept that we now have to help people become entrepreneurs, help people create their own businesses. And that's past the basic ABCs that you get necessarily in your school. To me, that takes more parental involvement, more of us allowing our kids to go down the rabbit holes, not just us. One of the ways Nike became one of the biggest companies in the world is because they were one of the first athletic wear companies to sell to children's sizes. A child started wearing Nike when they were a year old. And guess what? So they loved the swoosh from the time they were a year old. So they grew and they continue to grow. Well, same concept here. You start kids, you let them make mistakes, you let them learn. My daughter, for example, is in the local business club. You get to know people, you go and try these different things, because there aren't factory jobs, and honestly, there probably aren't going to be a lot of factory jobs. So we have to get our education system to understand, to be bold and realize, how do we invent new things? How do we create? How do we find our genius, as our friend Angel Meyer says? How do we find our genius? And help children find these things that are going to give them a direction once they get out of school, because the ABCs that they go to every day is not going to necessarily prepare. Yeah, it may prepare you to be a cashier at Walmart. Who knows how long that'll even last?
So you're talking about soft skills. You're talking about, we have some innate strengths that our current education system does not foster and support. They have a different agenda. They have a different viewpoint of what their goal is. And you're saying that together as a community and as people, fostering these soft skills of confidence and problem solving and decision making and things like that are a benefit.
They can go out on their own if they have to.
Okay.
They can go out and be an insurance agent, which is a difficult thing to do. That's not an easy job. No. If you can't relate to people, you're going to struggle as an insurance person, right? So you have to develop more than just the ABCs. You have to develop interpersonal skills. You have to be leadership skills. You have to, all of those things at a much younger age than we were used to, because we can't go into a factory and work for $10 an hour or whatever.
Okay.
It's just not available anymore. I grew up, we had a textile industry. We don't have a textile industry. Okay. We all had to make changes. We have to learn from our history here a little bit and understand that we've got ourselves where we became a service-oriented country more than an industrial country. And if we're not capable of having the interpersonal skills to give those services, we're going to have or create our own jobs. We're going to have a hard time in the future.
Yeah, Jessica, you gave a lot there, and I don't think it's fair that we only get to answer the question that you left with, because I think there was way too much stuff to talk about. So,
well, if you want to go down a whole different path, you take it. Run with it.
So I want to get one confession out of the way first, and this is very appropriate to the conversation. You keep mentioning books, and I've mentioned a couple times self-awareness of how you learn. I don't actually read books. Like, that's like one of my weaknesses. I have tried. I have so many books that I've bought, and I've said, this is going to be the one. I'm going to read this thing. You know, you hear everyone talking about, and as you guys guilt me for making me feel bad for not reading, that's okay. I've been dealing with it for the last 45 minutes. But I mean, we let people peer pressure us into the way that we think we should be learning, right? So big, huge thing. I think that people they're not confident enough in themselves and their own ability to learn to do it in a way that fits. And two, you were talking about, we become a service-oriented kind of community, and you're talking about the jobs that, need to exist or don't exist anymore. Kind of the way that I see it, and just kind of a heads up, I don't know if this is going to happen. I would like it to happen, but so much of what we do is focused on the stuff that we learn. We learn it to make money, then to just go back and basically manage our lives and go get the stuff that we need and bring it back to our house. And that's kind of it. Like, we spend it shopping and buying stuff and things like that, as opposed to maybe evolving to a place where a lot of, like you said, automated, a lot of that stuff's handled for us. So where we can actually go out and experience things and just have a more of an experience-driven kind of existence, if you will, to where we don't have to worry about bringing all the stuff back to the house or whatever we need to get by for the week. this is probably contrary to the entire conversation that we've had. I also think it's very healthy to just maybe put yourself in a bunker for an extended period of time, right? Just to shut your brain off, because if you don't do any of the stuff that you've learned, it's useless. I mean, not totally useless, but I mean, implementation, we talked about, 3% of whatever. I don't know if that was on the actual, if we were talking before or after, but if you're not actually taking action on the stuff you're learning, especially in your business, right? I mean, personal life, it can come and go and you can implement it as you see fit. But if you're learning always about your business, but you're never doing, know when you've learned enough to actually get going. And if learning is getting in the way of taking action, just put a helmet on and just kind of tune everything out for 6 months and have the discipline to pull yourself back out of it once you've actually kind of gotten on and actually started to do something.
That's not contrary. And in fact, that is an amazing piece of advice. I know people who read a book a week, or they watch all of these how-to videos, or they're listening to all of this information. And you're right. If they're not using it, Joey, what are they doing with it? It's great that it's in there. There's no practical application, and we actually get stuck in a place. It's a trap. It's a trap
it distracts you, right? Because it makes you feel like you're accomplishing something and you're not. So it's just avoiding the distraction and knowing when to take action, I guess.
You can go to 1 million training classes. If you never actually go and make that actionable, then you've never really learned it. If you read a book this week and next week you're reading a different book and you forgot what the first book says, why did you read the book in the first place?
I think people dramatically or underestimate, whichever one is right, the amount of time it's going to take to actually do the thing that they're learning about, right? Like they think because it didn't happen in 2 weeks that let's move on to the next thing. But it's something that might take a year and they're just not patient enough to see it through.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we're stopping on that. That was a very strong end. I like it. This program was pretty amazing. And we talked about things like theory of training is an opportunity to learn and emulate before you originate, and mentioned several studies, several videos, several podcasts, several books. All of this stuff is really interesting because it illustrates firsthand that whether we hear, see, or touch to learn or use a combination of them, we also are learning every single day, even if it's just, wow, somebody had a bad day because they cut me off as I was trying to turn the corner to get to my next destination. Or, oh man, I had a really poor experience with the person that was checking me out as I was buying my groceries. And then how do we take that one step further? Does it matter to me? And can I put myself in their shoes? What might have been going wrong instead of just reacting to something? You will find the program notes for today's program, Personalized Learning, at thevoiceofboldbusiness.com/P47. That is P for program 47. You may also search Personalized Learning from the voiceofboldbusiness.com website. Make sure to subscribe and rate the Voice of Bold Business Radio on your preferred listening platform. We want to make sure that you have every episode delivered directly to you as it is published. We also know, you leaders out there, me right here, that it's what we do, what we say, and how we act, in addition to the way we think and the information that we expose ourselves to, that define what it means to be a leader today. And you're part of that conversation. And I want to ask you and leave you with this question. What do you do to build and implement your own personalized learning?
Subscribe at thevoiceofboldbusiness.com and get more information, program notes, and past episodes. Bold leaders approach each situation and focus on action to achieve a higher level of leadership. Jessica Dewell, your business advocate, is the host of the Voice of Bold Business Radio. Thank you for joining us.